Assalamu alaikum. It's nice to see you again as we continue to understand how we can bring in the divine characteristics of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into our daily lives to improve our relationships with our families. The name we're going to discuss today is Al-Razzaq. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Razzaq, which means all of our rizq in our lives, or what is written for us, comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In our family lives, day to day, we experience ups and downs. And one of the greatest struggles that we often see among couples and in families is the struggle of financial difficulties. We're living in uncertain economic times, and sometimes when one or the other of the spouses gets laid off, loses a job, has a situation, financial difficulty in business, it can cause a great deal of stress on the relationship. Now, as much as in our hearts we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Razzaq and that the rizq comes from Him, sometimes there can be that difficulty where we feel that we struggle and we work hard in order to receive the means or the provisions to care for our families, and sometimes that working hard can feel futile, can feel like you're working and nothing is going right from a financial perspective. Now, there's a difference between understanding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as Al-Wahhab, which is the name that we discussed yesterday, and Al-Razzaq as the one who gives us rizq. Our rizq is written for us. We will not receive a penny more than what is written for us in our life, nor will we receive a penny less than what is written for us in our lives. As Al-Wahhab, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can sometimes bestow upon us gifts that are unexpected. As Al-Razzaq, our rizq is already written for us. But this doesn't mean that we don't strive for our rizq. It doesn't mean that we sit at home, eating a bag of chips and watching TV and say, well, my rizq is going to come to me. I don't need to do anything. No, the striving, while at the same time recognizing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best of all planners, is part of that process. When we think of the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to focus on having that sense of tawakkul, it means recognizing that He is the best of all planners, recognizing that all good comes from Him, but at the same time doing our part. Who can forget, of course, the narration of Sayyidina Hajar, the mother of Sayyidina Ismail, when she was left in the desert with the Prophet Ismail, who was just an infant at that time, and her infant began to cry. Rather than simply sitting beside him and making dua that the provision will come from Allah, she went back and forth from mountain to mountain, from Safa to Marwa, looking for that water, doing her part, knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Razzaq and that the rizq will come, but at the same time striving. And Al-Sa'i, which that walk back 7 times from Safa and Marwa is called, literally that word means to strive. And we replicate that same type of sa'i, that striving, 7 times between Safa and Marwa when we are honored to go to Umrah or to complete the Hajj, because it reminds us of the importance of striving in our life. So I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses all of our endeavors in this dunya, blesses all of our efforts to strive together as husband and wife, as a family, to provide for our families. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Razzaq, brings our rizq to us in a way that is one of ease rather than one of difficulty. Jazakum Allahu khair, and I look forward to speaking to you again tomorrow as we continue to discuss how we can bring the divine into the daily. Assalamu alaikum.